And you're recording this, right? Okay.
Yes, so I just started the recording and we will talk about fee for service. So, like I said, I tried to wait for this until I had more answers and I could give you a more comprehensive idea what this is going to look like. I still don't know everything yet, and it's probably going to take a few weeks or maybe even a few months before we understand how this is going to look day to day. But we will talk through what we do know, and then you guys can ask questions and I'll write them down and get the answers for them. So the first thing I want to talk about is why are we changing this? We're funded by the Delaware Morrow Mental Health Service and Recovery Board, and they use tax dollars to give us money to do what we do. And they want to make sure that the tax dollars are being used for what they're supposed to be used for. So the idea behind it is good. So moving to fee for service is that the board's attempt to knowing exactly what they're funding. So like I said, the idea behind it is good. We use the money that they give us for what they give us, for why they give it to us. So we're good to go there. We're just running into a couple hiccups because the model that they want us to use to report all of this stuff doesn't exactly fit everything that we do. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but we're going to work it out the best we can. There are other agencies who are going to have a harder time than us because they do more universal. And in order to capture the true number of students they work with, they would have to put every single student into their ECR and then build their universal stuff out like a group. So luckily, most of the work we do is group work and individual, so we don't have to do that, to worry about that so much. So the idea behind this is that every dollar of funding is tied to a service provided by an agency, which is us, tied to a particular client. So here's the quick and the dirty about what we know. The changes day to day, we are going to be able to bill for travel, documentation, supervision, and administrative time. These are all things that are considered overhead, but the board understands that we can't do our job without these things. So they're letting us bill our time to these things as well. To keep staff from having to track everything and all do billing, we're just going to do everything into CareLogic, which is a system we're already familiar with. Most of our students will be in there anyway, and we'll just build it out into our schedule. We'll now have to enter all of our activities, so everything we do into CareLogic. So we're shooting for about 6 hours of billable time in a day, but billable time also includes travel, documentation, supervision, and prep time. So this is not productivity, because productivity is only when you're working with a client. This is just trying to show the board everything we do that they give us funding for. So best practice, I think, is going to be to save 15 to 30 minutes at the end of your day to make sure that everything from your day is in there. Don't wait to the end of the week and then try to bill out your entire week. It's going to be, especially at first, it's going to be really overwhelming. So try to save some time at the end of the day to make sure that everything that you do is in the schedule in CareLogic. So what do you need to know? Starting July 1st, we'll enter summer groups into CareLogic. And I know one thing that everybody likes about summer groups is that you don't have to do documentation. So the documentation is going to be really minimal. The only reason we're doing this is so that we can capture each client that we're actually working with and the number of hours that we're working with them. So we're going to keep the documentation to a very, very small minimum. So one clinician will document the morning group, the other will document the afternoon group. If there are 3 of you, you can draw straws about who's going to do it and who's not going to do it. And also starting July 1st, we're going to bill out the schedule of all the activities you're doing. So if you can't tie it to a client, use client shadow billing. So when you're working on all this admin stuff, when you're putting all those clients in, when you're doing your documentation, you can bill that to client shadow billing. So that all counts. When you're checking your email, when you're prepping for a group, when you're doing research, all of that counts. So the program will remain the same. It will be Delaware County School Prevention. Delaware County Juvenile Court for Lily, Strengthening Families for Carrie, Olentangy split funded for Rachel, Ashley, and Kirsten, and Olentangy board funded for Laura and Ethan, and then Crisis anytime we're doing Crisis. So that will not change. For the activities, though, we're going to use Prevention Delaware County and not School Prevention Delaware County. So you can see that there's a new one that's circled. That's what we're going to use to find all of our categories. So the School Prevention Delaware County, we'll be done with that at the end of this week, July 30th. Yes, yours will be under that too. Yes, yours will be under that too. I was going to say you bill to the same grant, but you don't. But your activities will be in the same spot. And so will Lily's. So this is what it looks like. These are the options. The assessment, referral, and linkage is a mistake, so I'm going to get that taken out of there. That's what they use in Franklin County. We don't use that. So attending a hearing is mostly Lily. The brief early intervention and brief early intervention individual, those are the same. Consultation, I think, is a mistake. I don't know why consultation and consultation for Delaware Morrow are both in there. So go ahead and use the consultation for Delaware Morrow until I find out from Nina why we have two consultations in there. She's actually out of the office until tomorrow, which is why I don't know all of the answers here. For crisis intervention, we're going to still use that, but we're going to bill every time we use that under the crisis program. So if a student isn't open in crisis, we're going to open them in crisis as well and bill all the crisis stuff under crisis, because we got additional funds up to 2 FTEs every week to bill crisis. So the Delaware and Morrow County Court is mostly Lily. Go ahead.
Crisis is anytime they do like the risk assessment stuff.
A risk assessment, a safety plan, or following up with a kid with a high suicidal ideation will be crisis. So the documentation right here is what we'll use for documentation. As far as all the DAs, I'm not 100% sure why they're in here. I think they might be in here for Olin-TNG because we don't bill Medicaid. So I'm guessing that all of those DAs are for you all. The discharge summary is the same. The engagement documentation is the same. The individual counseling, I think, is also for Olin-TNG for any kid who doesn't have Medicaid to use that. Memo to chart, parent group, and professional development are all the same. Program administration is new. So this is going to be your catch-all category. So anytime you're checking email, you're prepping for group, you're cleaning up from group, you're doing anything, or if you have multiple very short things that are not long enough for a thing, you'll just group them all into the program administration. Supervision is new, so we'll use that for supervision. And then travel is new, and we'll use that for travel.
So this may be a silly question, but we're going to do documentation and then document that we did documentation, right?
Yes,
okay.
But
I'm not trying to.
Yeah, no, yeah. So we're going to talk in the next slide.
Okay.
Oh, I'll have screenshots of the new documentation. Okay. On Wednesday, I don't have that yet.
Will mine be broke down in like SF, individual psychotherapy, SF, prevention, SF?
So if they have Medicaid, you'll bill Medicaid, and if they don't have Medicaid, you'll use those things that say Olin-TNG on it, because then we'll bill it to the board. But it won't say strengthening families anymore. But they'll be open under the Strengthening Families program. So that's where the difference will be. And for Lily, they'll be open under the court program.
And if they're open under Medicaid, what do I use?
Just the regular treatment stuff. That won't change. So your question, I want to go back to it. So everything bills to the closest quarter hour. So because of that, everything has to be 8 minutes or longer in order to generate a bill. Otherwise, it'll go down to 0 minutes. So if you do something that's 7 minutes, it's going to go down to 7. If you do something that's 8 or more, it's going to go up to 15. So if you do documentation for 3 students and the total of your 3 students is 15 minutes, you'll just do program administration instead of billing for each of those students. Yes. So the board wants us to tie everything to a client as much as we can, but the system that they've given us doesn't let us do that because anything under 7 minutes will look like we didn't do anything. So we're gonna do what we do, and anything that is under 7 minutes, we'll lump it in all together.
Okay.
So if you, let's see, the Delaware people, if you go from one school in Delaware to another school in Delaware, let's say you're going from Hayes to Smith, that's not going to be 7 minutes. You'll just lump that into program administration, your travel. So that you're not doing a 3-minute travel.
Are they gonna look at it closely enough to be like they didn't really travel all at 3 p.m. or they don't care, they just want it all lumped at whatever time?
It's going to be, so the number of minutes of the service are more important than getting it at the actual time. Okay. So Kristen and I talked through some scenarios where we would have 2 things going on at the same time. Let's say I was doing a risk assessment and one of you called me for supervision for something unrelated to my risk assessment. I would have 2 things going on at the same time. So I would bill my risk assessment out, and then I would bill later the supervision phone call if it was more than 8 minutes. Yeah. We're trying to make this as easy as possible. giving the board what they want without being ridiculous. So we don't want to be ridiculous. So there's some examples of ridiculousness in here, and we're not going to do that.
Well, I just didn't know if like the documentation itself counted as like they could see that I documented it.
Nope.
No. So okay.
Nope.
Oh, they're not going to be able to see, like, it won't be tied like that person. You're obviously going to see that I'm with that person for an hour. I'm going to have to do another note.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. If we have to document that we documented, or do they look and see they saw this kid, so that's documented? But they're not going to do that.
No. So if you do your documentation concurrently, then you don't need a documentation extra time.
Right.
But if you do it later, then you'll likely be doing multiple clients at the same time, right? So you'll just do a chunk of time and bill that to documentation in your schedule.
Oh, but I don't have to, like,
Each client.
No.
okay, I thought that's what you meant.
Nope.
I was like, oh my god.
No, not unless you're going to sit down and do like an hour worth of documentation for one kid. Maybe you would do that, I don't know, but likely not. So you would just block out your entire documentation and do it for client shadowing. Are there any other questions?
With that, what if you are actually like sitting down, say you're working on a treatment plan for a kid that's going to be more than 8 minutes, would you then tie it to that kid?
Yes.
Instead of client shadowing?
Yes.
So we're getting rid of like staff. Is everything now a client
Yes.
activity?
Everything will be a client activity. Yep.
Even like supervision or something.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll tie it to client shadowing.
Got it. Okay.
It doesn't make sense, but it's what our funders want, so we're going to give it to them. We're trying to make it as easy as possible. Like I said, we're not going to do a bunch of little stuff. We're going to really kind of ball it all up. So I have some questions to Nina about if things at the end of the day are going to combine into one bill. So let's say if we only kind of half listen to this because I don't want you to do it yet. But let's say we have 5 minutes of travel here and 5 minutes of travel here. My question to Nina is, will those 2 5 minutes of travel bundle into 10 at the end of the day? Or will each 5 minute travel go down to 0 and then it negates even in documenting it? So that's my question to her. We might have to run it a couple weeks and see what populates the bill to the board before we have an answer to that. But for now, just bundle everything under program administration if it's short. Okay?
We're just trying to 8 minutes.
Yeah, I know. It's like, go to Starbucks. Or just, circle. We don't want to do that. And that's one of my statements to the board when we tell them about this. I'm like, do you really want us to drive 6 minutes somewhere and then sit in the car for 2 minutes so we can bill it?
Right.
No. The answer is no.
Right.
They're not going to want us to do that. And then if we do, I have this in here. If we are in an hour-long supervision and we talk about 10 students in that hour-long supervision, they want us to do notes for each single client because it ties that to the client. We're not going to do that, A, because it's ridiculous, and B, because they won't bill. Because they'll go down to less than 8 minutes and they won't bill. So we're billing out an entire hour of supervision of client shadowing. Yes. Do you have a question? No, just nodding. Okay. All right. I know. So for timing, I already said that a couple times. Services billed to the closest quarter hour. So everything in prevention has to be 8 minutes or longer. DAs have to be 30 minutes, which has always been the rule. That hasn't changed. And psychotherapy has to be at least 16 minutes because it bills to the nearest half hour. So like I said earlier, if you have an activity such as travel, documentation, or supervision that doesn't hit 8 minutes, bundle it with a previous activity or the next activity as program administration. We're trying to make this as easy as possible. We don't want you to go in and do a note for every 8 minutes of your day. That's really not a good use of anybody's time. And it's taking away service time. So I'm pretty sure the board won't want us to do that either. And then I said this a little bit earlier, but the correct number of minutes matters more than the exact time in your schedule. So if you have something weird where you can't quite get your activity in at the right time for some reason, you can put it on your schedule for later in the day. I don't think the board is going to see when we met with this particular student. They're just going to see the number of minutes. So you don't have to worry about that. So this is another thing, which is good news. Every activity bills at the same rate. So if you're doing a risk assessment and you have to call your supervisor, you don't have to put both on your schedule. You just bill the entire time for a risk assessment tied to that client. So it's not like you have to do 15 minutes of risk assessment, 15 minutes of supervision, and then 15 minutes of risk assessment. It's just all risk assessment. Any questions about this? Okay. So, like I said earlier, we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. There's going to be some there are going to be some things that we do that aren't captured in here, and they're not captured in there, right? For example, I use universal. So some agencies, all they're doing is universal, and I don't know how they're going to do this because it's kind of a nightmare. If you're talking to 100 kids, you don't want to enter in 100 kids, and that's the only time you're going to see them. So since universal is such a small portion of what we do, we're just going to roll it like we've always done it. We're just going to get credit for meeting with one kid. So if you meet with 3 kids, if you meet with 300 kids, it's the same. But I don't think there's any easy way to capture the number of kids that we actually meet with in a universal. So we're gonna roll with it and see how it works out. And like I said earlier, we talk about 10 clients in supervision. They would like us to do 10 notes because they'll each be tied to a client. We are not going to do that. And I use undue burden. Undue burden. We're not going to do it. So like Kate said earlier, everything will now be a C, a client activity. So they won't be S's anymore. So this meeting, if you put this into your thing, it will be program administration under client activity built to shadow billing. And I wrote, add client shadow billing to your caseload. You'll be spending a lot of time together. So if you can't tie an activity to a client shadow billing is your friend. So make sure that they are on your caseload. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I want to say more about it. So we were given 2 FTEs for crisis. So Amy, who will be the new Delaware Buckeye Valley coordinator, her direct service time will be crisis. And then we also have clinicians around the county in Morrow County who are also doing direct service to crisis. So anytime you do a risk assessment, you do a safety plan, the subsequent check-ins, do that under crisis. So we will then be able to tap into the crisis funds that we have and make sure that we're using both pots of money. And then we'll also have a really good count of the number of students who are at risk across the counties. We'll be able to keep a better eye on them. So Amy will be able to log in, and even though she's not doing a lot of direct service in Olentangy, she'll be able to see how many kids from Olentangy are open in crisis. This might change a little bit, so we're going to keep an eye on all of these funds and kind of see where it's all panning out. I don't know what it's going to look like, so this might shift a little bit as we get into the school year. Are there any questions about crisis? Right. FAQs as we know them now. So like I said earlier, we're figuring this out as we go. If you have a question, ask. Kristen, Ethan, and I all sat down on Friday, and we all thought of things that the other hadn't thought of, kind of walked through scenarios and came up with what we thought was the best idea for it. So if you have a question, other people probably do too. So ask somebody, ask one of us, and then we'll get it written down, and then we'll have a page of kind of scenarios that have come up and what we've done in it so that we're all. Hi, Ethan.
Sorry, I don't know why I just unmuted.
That's okay.
I was moving my laptop and hit the mic button. Sorry.
That's all right. Good timing. So one of the things that Kristen, Ethan, and I thought about on Friday is who bills for supervision. So if Ashley and I met for half an hour and we're talking about one client for the half an hour, if we both bill to that client for the half an hour, it would be double billing. So we don't want to do that. But I'm also still doing supervision. So we decided that the supervisee will bill to the client and the supervisor will bill to shadow billing. So if we do a group, and there are 6 people in that group, everybody will bill to a client shadow billing, because you can't tie what we're doing to a single client unless the entire group is devoted to one client, which I don't think will happen. And then we'll pick one person to bill to them and everybody else will bill to client shadow billing. Like we said earlier, if a supervision is less than 8 minutes, so if you call somebody and you need consultation on something, if it's less than 8 minutes, don't bother doing a supervision note, just roll it into whatever you're doing. So if you're doing a risk assessment, if you're doing program administration, documentation, whatever, just count it in that. And then I have my little silly face because this all takes a good sense of humor to get through. All right, any questions about that? All right. Are there any other questions of scenarios that are popping in your head where you would not know how to document them? No?
When it, when the United Way comes about whatever,
Mhm.
behavior management mostly.
Yes.
Not really.
Mhm.
Is that client shadow bullying?
Yes. So anything that talks about multiple clients or somebody who's not in CareLogic will be client shadow bullying. Any other questions about that? Okay, so I did a little bit of a wrap up. Tie activities to specific clients as much as possible without being ridiculous. Prevention activities have to be 8+ minutes. All activities should be client activities instead of staff activities, so they're the little C in your schedule instead of the S. Summer groups will be documented as groups starting in July, so that means we'll have to enter each student into point of entry. Meetings will be program administration, and when in doubt, ask. We'll figure it all out together. So are there any other questions about this? I know it's a big change. I know it's coming fast. Luckily, we don't have groups that first week of July, so we can kind of figure it out, come up with a game plan for the second week of groups when we're doing actually some direct service.
You said it was 6 hours a day that we're shooting
That's
for.
what we're shooting for.
Mhm.
We'll have to see what it all
Okay. Well, just because like
plays out.
I'll have some days coming up where I'm just gonna work on like my chat and shoot groups
Mhm.
next year. So like I didn't know how
Program
long I
administration.
should I like break it up?
Nope.
Or should I just 6 hours?
Do what you do. Yep.
Okay.
So that's what my schedule's gonna look like
Okay.
most of the day, unless I'm in a meeting.
Because I didn't want them to be like, you didn't really sit for 6 hours. You took breaks. You took a lunch. You
No.
took a pee. Whatever they're
No.
gonna look for. So I didn't want.
I don't think they're gonna be. They're not.
Okay.
They're
I
not
didn't
gonna get.
know.
Yeah. They're not
like
gonna get.
Medicaid is. They'll be
Yeah.
like, you did not do that for 6 hours. You took a half
Yeah.
minute lunch. And
No.
you need it.
The board is not going to do that. A,
Okay.
they don't care.
Okay.
B, they don't have the manpower to look at it that closely.
Okay.
And I don't think the reports they're going to get are going to be that detailed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So do I have to worry about no shows?
No, because we built that into your program. We built no shows into your program. So as part of your the outcomes that we're going to report to the board, we told them that we're going to give them stories, success stories, because your population has such a high no-show rate, and the whole purpose of your program is to engage people who wouldn't normally be engaged.
You can
So
probably
we're good
just
to
cover
go.
the no-show time with like documentation.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not
Yeah.
like I just sit there.
No,
But you
yeah.
know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, now do I have to worry like an outpatient clinician?
Nope.
would?
No, so this isn't productivity. It's just we're trying to figure out a way to show the board what it is that we're doing without creating a lot of extra work. So you don't have to worry about that. It'll be fine. And then in the crisis program, we have what's called rapid engagement, which is just being available for walk-ins. So we might be able to add that to your program as well, because that's part of the model. So I'll work on getting that added. All right, any other questions? Okay, I have one more thing that's exciting. Oh, I was looking for a thing about change, so this is what I came up with. The pessimist complains about the wind, the optimist expects it to change, and the realist adjusts the sails. So this is us being realists and adjusting the sails. I really think that we're going to end up hitting our cap. So in the past, we've always gotten 1/12 of our grant every month. I really think that we're going to end up hitting our dollar amount probably in April or March, April, May. Franklin County does. I think we're going to do the same thing. So that will give us a really good argument to go into the board and saying the services we're providing between when we hit that cap and June 30th are free. So maybe you should give us more money. So that's what I'm anticipating. We'll have to see how it all plays out. All right, so this is one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Amanda Niblick, who is the intake supervisor, wanted everybody to fill out a form, a paper form, and email it or fax it over to her. And I feel like that's just one more piece of paper, and it's hard to keep on top of the newest version and everything. So I asked her and Nina to create a referral form in CareLogic. So now anytime we're doing a DA and we need the initial put on our schedule, we can do that through CareLogic. So we will go in our client's ECR, we'll go to client, referral, intake appointment form. And then it'll look like all the other documentation where you hit up in the corner, add a document. And then this is what it looks like. So in this, we just have to, the first one is referring staff, so that will be you. what program should the appointment be scheduled under. So you will know your split funded, your strengthening families, whatever, Buckeye Valley Mental Health. It's too much for me to remember. You guys just have to remember like one or two. Buckeye Valley Mental Health, board funded, split funded, yeah. And then the date and time you want the appointment to be, the client's date of birth, the client's name, social security, all of that. And then you sign it, and then you send it to Amanda Niblick for the second signature, and that's where she will see it and put it on your schedule. Her turnaround time with this is going to be pretty quick, but if there's a weird situation where the family is there and you didn't get a chance to do this, start with the comprehensive DA and then have her put the initial on your schedule later and then go in and fill that in. So I think the only person who has that situation is Lily, where they're like, do a DA now.
Right.
And she's like, I don't have time to ask them to put it on my schedule. So she's going to start the comprehensive and go through all of that and then ask Amanda to put the initial on her schedule later. All right, any other questions? So many things. I'm going to send this out as a PDF so that everybody has it as a reference. And then this whole video I'm going to put on YouTube so that the people who weren't here can watch it. Morrow County is going to watch it. And then if you have any questions, you can walk through it as well. Like I said, I will have screenshots of all the new documentation by Wednesday, and I'll send that out to everybody. And then once we get through a bunch of FAQs, we'll build the FAQ list and send it out to everybody too. So I think it's going to be okay. I understand that this is a lot. I have no problem going to the board and saying, this is a lot. You need to be patient with us. So we kind of asked for a 3-month grace period to figure it out, and they said that was fine. So that's it. Adding to all of this funness is the fact that I'm going to be on vacation the week this goes into effect. And so is Sarah Harrison. Yay! And Amy will be new. So it'll be Ethan and Kristen answering a lot of questions.
No pressure.
No pressure. You're fine. You're fine. Trial by fire. It's all good. You can just send them all to Amy. All right.
That's not.
I'm going to stop the recording.